Why do some people seem to have the world at their feet while others struggle just to be noticed? Does one person's shine always have to come at the cost of someone else's shadow? At Green Valley High School, Tyler was king. With his perfectly styled blonde hair, dazzling smile, and designer clothes, he was the epitome of privilege. Coming from a wealthy family, Tyler exuded a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He was the captain of the basketball team, the host of the best parties, and the kind of guy who could make even the teachers laugh at his jokes, even when they weren't funny. Ethan, on the other hand, was used to blending into the background. At 17, his dark skin gleamed under the sun as he rode his creaky bike to school. His short hair was always neatly groomed, a habit passed down from his mother, but his faded clothes and worn-out sneakers told the story of a tough life. He lived in a small trailer with his mom and 2 younger siblings, shouldering the responsibility of helping at home while maintaining his status as the top student in his class. To Tyler and his friends, Ethan was an easy target. He didn't talk much, didn't fight back against the teasing, and most of all, didn't seem to care about not being part of the right group. But the truth was different. Every joke cut Ethan deeply, though he never let it show. One afternoon in the school parking lot, Tyler spotted Ethan leaning his bike against a shiny new sports car. "Hey, Ethan!" he called out, his voice carrying that mocking tone that made everyone stop and listen. "Don't you think your bike is embarrassing, that car? Maybe we should start a fundraiser to get you something less depressing." Tyler's friends erupted in laughter, and Ethan, as always, walked away in silence. But something shifted inside him that day. Hours later in the cramped trailer he called home, Ethan stared at his reflection in the mirror, the sound of distant laughter replaying in his mind. He was tired, not just of the jokes, but of how they seemed to reduce everything he was to nothing. Closing his eyes, he took a deep breath and remembered his mother's words. "You are bigger than any challenge they throw your way." The next morning, Tyler pushed even further. He taped a piece of paper to Ethan's locker, featuring a drawing of a car with the words "Ethan's Dream" scrawled across it in bold letters. When Ethan arrived, the hallway was packed with students laughing and snapping pictures of the announcement. He took a deep breath, tore the paper down, and walked away without a word. But the worst was yet to come. During a class presentation, Ethan shared a detailed plan for a sustainable irrigation system he had spent weeks researching. It was his chance to prove to everyone that he was more than they thought. But as Ethan passionately explained his idea, Tyler accidentally knocked over a glass of water onto the table, soaking the cardboard model and ruining Ethan's work. "Oops, my bad, man. Didn't realize it was so fragile," Tyler said with a smirk as the classroom filled with laughter. Ethan looked at the soaked remnants of his project. His eyes burned, but he refused to let the tears fall. At that moment, something changed within him. It wasn't anger, but a quiet determination. That night, in the cramped trailer, Ethan pulled out a small notebook he kept under his bed. On the cover, he scribbled the words, "My future starts now." Ethan didn't know how, but one thing was clear. He would never let anyone diminish him again. And little did he know, this promise would be the start of a journey that would not only transform his life, but Tyler's as well. How does someone turn pain into strength? And what happens when a final humiliation becomes the starting point for something extraordinary? Monday arrived faster than Ethan would have liked, and he rode his old creaky bike to school, just as he did every day. The chipped paint and rattling frame were a constant reminder of his reality. But this morning, something within him had shifted. The words he had scribbled in his notebook the night before were etched into his mind. "My future starts now." Tyler, on the other hand, started the day as usual, surrounded by his group of friends in the parking lot. He cracked jokes and laughed loudly, his dominance over the others as obvious as the sun shining in the sky. As soon as Ethan stepped into the school's main hallway, a new humiliation awaited him. Tyler had plastered copies of the Ethan's Dream drawing, a caricature of a luxury car with an exaggerated cartoon version of Ethan behind the wheel, all over the lockers, walls, and even the bathroom door. For a brief moment, Ethan felt like turning around and leaving, but he didn't. With his head held high, he tore down one of the papers, crumpled it, and threw it into the trash, not because it didn't hurt, but because he refused to give Tyler the satisfaction of seeing him break. In the classroom during a break, Ethan sat in a corner with his notebook. He started writing, but was interrupted when Tyler and his friends walked by. "Still dreaming about that car, Ethan?" Tyler mocked, his friends laughing behind him. Ethan slammed the notebook shut. looked up at Tyler and for the first time replied, "I may not have everything you do, but you'll never know what it means to really fight." The brief silence was quickly replaced by more laughter from Tyler's group. But something in Ethan's tone unsettled Tyler. He didn't like the idea that Ethan, the boy he had humiliated so often, might have a strength he himself lacked. The day went on, and it seemed like the school was conspiring to test Ethan. During history class, the teacher assigned group projects. Ethan ended up in a group with Tyler and two of his friends, who seized the chance to mock his ideas. "Let Ethan handle the easy part," one of them said. "He must be great at drawing, considering his dream car." But Ethan didn't react. He focused on the project, knowing that every time he ignored their taunts, he was strengthening his resolve. After school, Ethan returned home exhausted. But instead of resting, he started planning. He knew that if he wanted to prove his worth, he'd have to work harder than anyone else. He committed to studying late into the night, even after helping his mom with chores and looking after his younger siblings. That night, while Tyler lounged in his mansion watching a game on TV, Ethan sat on the floor of his small trailer, lit only by the glow of a desk lamp. He pored over library books and filled his notebook with ideas, goals, and calculations. He wasn't just studying, he was building a path to the future. What Tyler didn't realize was that while he was mocking, Ethan was quietly transforming into something far greater than Tyler could ever imagine. Ethan decided that no one else would control his story. And as Tyler laughed unaware, he was fueling the strength of someone who would one day stand as his equal. What if true strength isn't about what we show the world, but what we do when no one is watching? And how can quiet nights of hard work transform into days of triumph? As the months went by, Ethan embraced his routine of work and study with a discipline that would impress any adult. By day, he attended school and endured Tyler's relentless humiliation. In the afternoons, he worked at a local auto repair shop, helping support his family. At night, in the quiet of his trailer, he studied tirelessly with library books ranging from physics to social justice debates. At the shop, Ethan found a different kind of education. He loved taking engines apart, discovering how each piece fit together, how every tiny screw was essential to something so powerful. "Life's like an engine," Mr. Wilson, the shop's owner, said one particularly busy afternoon. "You need the right parts, but you also need to know how to use them." Ethan carried those words like a chapter from a life manual. At school, while Tyler continued his mockery, Ethan started to notice something. There was a difference between the laughter of Tyler's friends and Tyler himself. The others laughed because they thought it was funny, but Tyler's laughter seemed forced, almost as if he needed to prove something. Ethan began to suspect that maybe, just maybe, Tyler was more lost than he appeared. One night, as Ethan worked through physics calculations, his mother walked into his small room with a cup of tea. "You work so hard, Ethan," she said, her voice filled with pride and concern. "I wish I could give you more." Ethan smiled, holding her hand. "You've already given me everything, Mom. Now it's my turn to give back." His words were genuine. He knew his efforts weren't just for himself, but also for the family that had always believed in him. Things began to change when Ethan received unexpected news at school. During class, the counselor called his name and asked him to come to the office. He walked in, a mix of nerves and curiosity swirling inside him. "Ethan," the counselor said with a warm smile, "we've received some incredible news. You've been awarded a full scholarship to Stanford University. It covers not just tuition, but also housing and books." Ethan froze for a moment, unable to process what he'd just heard. I got it?" he asked, his voice shaking. The counselor nodded and tears welled up in Ethan's eyes. The spark he had lit months ago now felt like a blazing fire. He didn't just have a future, he had a brilliant one. As he walked out of the office, Tyler was standing in the hallway with his friends. They looked at Ethan, waiting for some reaction, but this time, he walked past them with a quiet smile, ignoring their taunts completely. It was as if something invisible about Ethan had changed. Tyler noticed but didn't know how to respond. Back at the trailer, Ethan shared the news with his family. His mother cried tears of joy, hugging him tightly and saying, "I always knew you were special, my son. Always." That night, Ethan wrote in his notebook again, "I'm not done yet. The best is yet to come." Even with the scholarship secured, Ethan didn't slow down. He kept working at the shop, supporting his family, and sharpening his skills. He understood that success wasn't a destination, but a continuous journey. Meanwhile, Tyler began facing problems at home. His father, a successful businessman, was increasingly absent, and the pressure for Tyler to follow in his footsteps was mounting. For the first time, Tyler started questioning whether the power and wealth he flaunted really meant anything. But instead of confronting his doubts, he hid behind his mask of popularity, doubling down on his torment of Ethan as a way to compensate for his own insecurities. Ethan was on the brink of starting a new chapter in his life, but little did he know, the path to his success would lead him back to where it all began, and face to face with Tyler once more. How can two people's paths diverge so drastically? And what happens when one's light begins to outshine another's shadow? Ethan headed off to Stanford with more than just a suitcase. He carried the determination to build a future no one could take from him. Life on campus was unlike anything he had ever known. The modern classrooms, heated debates, and interactions with students from around the world opened his mind to possibilities that once seemed out of reach. Ethan quickly stood out, not just for his impeccable grades, but for his work ethic and willingness to help others. Meanwhile, Tyler began facing challenges he never anticipated. After graduation, his father insisted he take on a role in the family business. Still carrying the same superficial confidence from high school, Tyler thought it would be easy, but it quickly became apparent that he lacked the focus and discipline to manage the company. Meetings were chaotic, deadlines slipped through his fingers, and employees saw him as little more than a spoiled heir, not a leader. Ethan, on the other hand, kept racking up achievements. During his third year of college, he joined a program connecting students with internships at top law firms. Thanks to his flawless performance, Ethan secured a position at one of California's leading labor rights firms right after graduation. He specialized in defending exploited workers, particularly in cases against large corporations. His ability to connect with clients, many of whom had faced hardships similar to his own, earned him respect in the legal community. As Ethan's career flourished, Tyler faced mounting pressure to save his family's company, now showing clear signs of decline. The arrogance that once defined him began to crumble as he realized the problems were far beyond his ability to fix. Tyler's father, frustrated with the situation, distanced himself, leaving Tyler to handle the mess alone. One night, Tyler sat alone in his sprawling living room, surrounded by piles of paperwork. He stared at a photo of his father on the wall and wondered where it had all gone wrong. He had money, power, and every opportunity in the world. Yet for the first time, he felt the emptiness those things couldn't fill. It was impossible to ignore how much time had passed since high school. 25 years had gone by, yet in many ways it felt like a lifetime. During that time, Tyler had rarely thought about Ethan, the boy he had once humiliated. In fact, he hardly remembered anyone from back then. But now, as he faced the looming threat of bankruptcy, a nagging sense of nostalgia and regret began to surface. Memories of a time when he had everything but failed to appreciate it. One evening, as Ethan reviewed documents for a major case in his office, his mother sent him a message. It was an old photo of Ethan standing next to Mr. Wilson, the auto shop owner he had worked for as a teenager. The caption read, "Never forget where you came from." Ethan smiled at the image, a reminder of how hard work and the people who believed in him had helped him reach where he was today. The tension in their lives began to converge when allegations of labor violations at Tyler's company hit the media. Workers reported inadequate pay, unsafe conditions, and threats when they complained. The story gained traction, thrusting Tyler into a spotlight unlike anything he had ever experienced. Ethan, now a respected attorney, followed the news as part of his work, unaware that fate was about to reconnect him with Tyler. When his boss called him in to discuss a new case involving a major company accused of worker exploitation, Ethan opened the file and froze. At the top of the document was the name of Tyler's family business. The world felt smaller in that moment. Ethan closed the file and took a deep breath. "It's just another case," he told himself. But he knew it was more than that. This was the same Tyler who had tormented him years ago. And now, Ethan had the chance to face him, not with anger or revenge, but with something far more powerful: justice. Ethan was about to step into a courtroom where his past and present would collide. The boy who had once been humiliated was now ready to fight, not for himself, but for the workers who needed him. And Tyler, for the first time, would find himself in an unimaginable position, under fire. What would it be like to encounter someone who left such a mark on your life, even if for all the wrong reasons? And what happens when the past comes knocking at the moment you least expect it? Ethan walked into the courtroom with steady steps, carrying a folder of documents. He was used to defending exploited workers, but this case felt different. Something about the name of the company, Reynolds Industries, stirred long-buried memories. He hadn't thought about Tyler in decades, but now he was forced to confront the past. Meanwhile, Tyler sat at his dining room table, his head buried in his hands. The accusations against his company weren't just ruining his reputation, they were draining his finances. The media painted him as a villain, and he knew he deserved some of the blame. Still, he never imagined the case would end up in court, or that the opposition would be led by Ethan. On the morning of the trial, Tyler entered the courtroom in a suit, but his face was tired and worn. He avoided making eye contact with anyone, trying to block out the whispers about the businessman on the brink of ruin. When the prosecution's lawyers began to take their places, he glanced at the man in the dark gray suit leading the team. That was when the past hit him like a punch to the gut. It was Ethan, the boy he had mocked for years, the boy he had publicly humiliated countless times, now standing tall, confident, with determined eyes. Tyler quickly looked away, but it was too late. Ethan had noticed. Ethan, too, felt an immediate jolt. He recognized Tyler even after all those years. The blonde hair was still neatly styled, but his eyes had lost their once confident spark. Tyler looked worn down, as if carrying an invisible weight. Ethan kept his composure, but his mind flooded with memories. The hallway laughter, the locker stickers, the ruined project. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. "This isn't about me," he reminded himself. "This is about the workers." The trial began, and the tension in the air was palpable. Ethan presented evidence that Reynolds Industries had been exploiting its workers. He spoke about unpaid wages, unsafe conditions, and the threats made to employees who dared to complain. His tone was firm yet fair, and his words carried a conviction that commanded everyone's attention. Tyler, on the other hand, seemed to shrink with every argument Ethan made. He tried to defend himself, but his explanations rang hollow. His lawyer did his best to counter, but the evidence was too damning to refute. As Ethan spoke, Tyler couldn't help but think, "This man is everything I never was, strong, determined, respected." During a break, Tyler tried to summon the courage to approach Ethan. He watched him across the hallway, surrounded by his team. Ethan was calm, reviewing documents and talking with colleagues, exuding an air of unshakable confidence. Tyler hesitated. For the first time, he felt small next to someone he had once belittled. When the trial resumed, Ethan continued his work with the same precision. He showed no signs of anger or desire for revenge. Everything he did was focused on justice, a principle far greater than any personal resentment. The respect he garnered in the courtroom was evident. Even the judge seemed impressed by his skillful arguments. On the other side, Tyler was beginning to accept his inevitable defeat. He knew he would lose the case. But what bothered him most wasn't the money or the damage to his reputation. It was Ethan's presence, a living reminder of everything Tyler had once despised and, in some ways, envied. At the end of the day, Tyler finally found the nerve to approach him. As Ethan exited the courtroom, Tyler called out, his voice unsteady, "Ethan, do you have a minute?" Ethan stopped, turning to face him. For a moment, the silence between them was almost unbearable. Finally, Ethan replied, his tone neutral. "What do you want, Tyler?" Tyler hesitated, unsure of what to say. The words, "I'm sorry," felt too small for everything that had happened between them. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what I did to you, for who I was back then." His voice was sincere but strained. Ethan studied him for a few seconds, as if weighing his intentions. "The court will decide what's fair here," he said firmly. "As for what you did in the past, I've moved on. I hope you can learn from your mistakes." Without waiting for a response, Ethan turned and walked away, leaving Tyler alone to reflect on his words. The trial wasn't over yet, but something deeper had already begun to shift within Tyler. And Ethan, though he wouldn't admit it, knew that this encounter would serve as a lesson for them both. What is it like to see justice prevail against someone who once seemed untouchable? And how can it change not only a trial, but the lives of everyone involved? The courtroom was nearly silent. The weighty atmosphere reflected the gravity of the case. Exploited workers sat anxiously, awaiting a decision that could transform their lives, while journalists scrutinized every move Tyler and Ethan made, ready to turn the trial into headline news. Ethan stood at the center of it all. He remained composed, exuding confidence with every word he spoke. His statements were sharp, his arguments irrefutable. He presented fraudulent contracts, neglected safety reports, and heart-wrenching testimonies from employees who had suffered under Reynolds Industries. Each piece of evidence painted a clear picture. Tyler had not only failed as a leader, but as a human being. Meanwhile, Tyler seemed to sink lower into his chair at the defendant's table. His attempts to justify his actions convinced no one. He cast quick glances at Ethan, searching for any hint of compassion or pity, but Ethan stayed professional, treating the case like any other. For Tyler, that was a punishment greater than any sentence, realizing he was no longer the center of Ethan's world. The trial's climax came when Ethan called a longtime company worker to the stand. With a trembling voice, the man described the degrading conditions he and his colleagues endured. "All I wanted was dignity," he said, his tearful eyes searching the room for support. "And they didn't even give me that." The courtroom was overcome with emotion. Even the judge, typically stoic, appeared moved by the worker's words. Ethan seized the moment to drive home his final point. This case isn't just about numbers on a balance sheet. It's about people. People who deserve respect, safety, and dignity. And it's our responsibility as a society to ensure these values are protected. When Tyler's defense argued that the issues were administrative errors and not intentional, Ethan was relentless. He dismantled every claim with surgical precision, leaving no doubt in anyone's mind that the excuses held no weight. Hours later, the judge delivered the verdict. Tyler and his company were found guilty of multiple labor violations and ordered to pay overdue wages and significant damages to the workers. The ruling also mandated immediate corrective measures to improve workplace conditions. The impact was immediate. Workers in the courtroom exhaled in relief, some shedding tears of joy. Journalists scrambled to file their stories, while the public murmured their quiet approval. Tyler, on the other hand, sat motionless. His bowed head reflected not just his legal defeat, but a moment of reckoning with who he had become. After the proceedings, Tyler approached Ethan in the hallway. He looked smaller than ever, as if the weight of the verdict had crushed what little pride he had left. "Ethan," he began, his voice wavering. I don't know what to say. I messed everything up." Ethan regarded him for a moment before replying. "Tyler, you have a choice. You can use this as an excuse to give up or as an opportunity to change. The decision is yours." Tyler nodded slowly, unable to meet Ethan's gaze for long. "Thank you," he whispered before walking away. As Tyler made his way down the corridor, surrounded by flashing cameras and reporters, Ethan remained at the back of the room, watching. He felt no triumph, no anger, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had done his part. For Ethan, true success wasn't about bringing Tyler down, but about lifting up those who needed it most. The case was closed, but the impact of the trial would be lasting. For Ethan, it was another step in his journey toward justice. For Tyler, it was a turning point, one that would force him to rethink everything he believed about himself. What's left when the trial is over? And how can the mistakes of the past become seeds for change? The days following the trial were intense for Tyler. The media branded him as the disgraced businessman and the corporate villain. The workers of Reynolds Industries, however, felt something entirely different: hope. The courtroom victory brought not only financial relief, but also the promise of better conditions. Meanwhile, Ethan returned to his routine. For him, the case was closed, but the image of Tyler in the courtroom lingered. Despite everything from their past, Ethan couldn't ignore Tyler's lost expression, a man drowning in the consequences of his own arrogance. A week after the verdict, Ethan received an unexpected call. It was Tyler's attorney requesting a private meeting. Ethan hesitated but agreed. Deep down, he knew there was still something unresolved between him and Tyler, something no court could adjudicate. On the day of the meeting, Tyler was seated at a small cafe, far from the public eye. He looked different. His blonde hair was less polished. The circles under his eyes were darker, and the confident smile was gone. When Ethan entered, Tyler stood nervously. "Thanks for coming," Tyler said as Ethan took a seat. Ethan met his gaze calmly. "What do you want, Tyler?" Tyler took a deep breath. "I wanted to apologize. Not just for what happened in court, but for everything. For high school, for the things I said and did. I was a jerk, Ethan. And only now, so many years later, do I realize how much I underestimated you, and how much I could have learned from you." Ethan stayed silent for a moment, processing the words. He saw sincerity in Tyler's face, but also something deeper, genuine regret. "Tyler," Ethan began, his voice steady but not harsh. "I've moved past what happened in high school. It wasn't easy, but I turned that pain into fuel. As for the court case, I was just doing my job. It was my duty to seek justice for those workers. But this isn't about me. It's about you. Tyler looked puzzled. About me? Yes, Ethan said. You have a chance to change. Not to fix your reputation, but to truly do something that matters. The past doesn't define who you are, but what you do next can. Ethan's words hit Tyler like a lightning bolt. He nodded slowly, and for the first time in years he smiled, not with arrogance, but with gratitude. Months later, a transformation began. Tyler took full responsibility for the company's wrongdoings, not only implementing the court-mandated changes, but exceeding them. He started visiting factories, listening to workers directly, and creating programs to improve their conditions. Gradually, his reputation shifted from corporate villain to reformed leader. Ethan followed the news from afar, keeping his distance. He was busy with other cases, but felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that his efforts had sparked lasting change. A year after the trial, Ethan received an unexpected invitation, an event at Reynolds Industries. It was the opening of a new worker training center, something Tyler had implemented to help employees gain skills for better opportunities. Ethan nearly declined, but something compelled him to attend. When he arrived, he saw Tyler on stage, speaking humbly about past mistakes and the steps he was taking to make things right. After the speech, Tyler spotted Ethan among the guests and approached him. "I couldn't have done this without you," Tyler said, shaking Ethan's hand. Ethan offered a faint smile. "I just did my part. The rest was up to you." In that moment, the two men, so different yet so connected by their history, found something rare: redemption and peace. Ethan continued his journey as a lawyer, championing those in need. He knew every case was a new chance to make a difference. Tyler, on the other hand, transformed his company and his life, proving that even the hardest falls can become the starting point for real change. For both men, their reunion was more than settling old scores. It was a reminder that true strength lies not in winning, but in learning, growing, and striving to do better. And so, two lives once defined by conflict found a shared purpose: to use their stories to inspire change. The past couldn't be altered, but the future, that could always be rewritten. As Ethan left the event, the sound of laughter and soft conversations filled the air. He glanced back and saw Tyler speaking with a group of workers, a man now completely different from the one he had known so many years ago. Ethan smiled to himself, feeling that, in some way, everything had been worth it. On his way home, Ethan reflected on his own journey. Life had tested him in ways he never could have imagined, but he had turned pain into purpose and challenges into accomplishments. He knew the road wasn't easy, but every step had brought him to this moment. With the understanding that true change begins when someone chooses to fight, not for revenge, but for justice. This story reminds us that no matter how challenging the circumstances, there is always a choice. We can let our past define us, or we can decide to build a better future for ourselves and for others. If you enjoyed this inspiring narrative, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to hear more uplifting stories like this one. And remember, the power to change is in your hands. See you next time.